Um, well, good afternoon, everybody. It's not quite evening, so it's late afternoon. I hope you're all okay. It might be morning wherever you're calling from, because we've got a variety of people calling in, not just from the UK, but from other parts of the world. So good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on where you're calling from. But we're in the afternoon here in the UK. My name's Tracy Dunford. I'm part of the Welsh branch, CIWEM Welsh branch, but I'm also a member of the CIWEM Water Resources Panel and also an assessment reviewer, so very involved in CIWEM. But I'm representing a Welsh branch today who are hosting this webinar, but it's not just for Welsh branch, it's for anybody across CIWEM, and as well as it's jointly badged with the Institute of Civil Engineers and supported by Waterwise. Before I introduce the speakers and then we start the talk, I just want to cover some housekeeping. First of all, if you've got any questions that you want to ask, please use the Q&A function for those, and I'll be monitoring those as we go through, and we will ask the questions at the end of the talk. And the talk will be about 45 minutes, and then we'll have questions for about 20 minutes or so, aiming to finish around between 5 and 10 past, depending on how many questions there are. Please use the chat function. Be wary that the chat function will be seen by all, but if there's something you urgently need to chat about, then use that. But really the chat function is going to be used for a poll that's going to be asked through the presentation. So really that's what the chat function is there for. I don't have to worry about fire alarms and health and safety, but I hope everybody's got refreshments, and unfortunately some of us have got windows open, so we'll mute when we're not speaking, or I will mute our video and microphone, so you will only hear and see the speaker when they go through the presentations. So I'd like to welcome you all here today then for a talk on water efficiency. Are we there yet? Which we'll be looking at how water efficient we all are, or think we all are, and what actions need to be taken now and in the future to be more water efficient, and why. Nathan Richardson, who's the head of policy and strategy at Waterwise, and Lydia Makin, who's the policy and project manager from Waterwise, have kindly agreed to talk to us today. And Nathan is also a member of the CIWEM Water Resources Panel, and Lydia's done lots of work, both of them in the water resources field. So if to not take up any more time, can I hand over to Nathan, who's going to be opening up, and I'll mute myself.
Yeah, hi there. Thank you very much, Tracy, for the introduction, and it's fantastic to be here talking to the CIWEM audience and to so many people as well that have taken time out of their day to dial in. So thanks for that. I've got quite a long history with CIWEM. I used to be a chair of the East Anglian branch, and I was secretary for quite a long time as well. Still involved through the Water Resources Panel, as Tracy mentioned. So today we're going to be looking at water efficiency. Are we there yet? That's the sort of question we're posing. Or you could put it another way and say, are we really water wise? Yeah, just a reminder to add questions as we're going along to the Q&A box. So in terms of the content of the talk, I'm going to give you a little introduction to Waterwise. We're going to move on and talk about why we need to be water wise. Thirdly, we're going to talk about how we're actually using the water that we're supplied at the moment. The fourth chunk of the agenda, we'll be looking at what we can do to reduce consumption. And both Lydia and I, the focus of our roles is really around policy. So we're going to focus on 5 policy steps that we think at Waterwise are needed to reduce consumption. And then we'll summarise that, and we'll do some Q&A. And Lydia and I are going to do it in a sort of tag team process. as we go through, just to give you a bit of variety of voices and avoid my sort of monotone voice getting on too long. No health and safety, but I did have a big flash of lightning and thunder outside my window a little while ago. So who are Waterwise? Well, we were founded in 2005. We're a small not-for-profit organisation, and our sort of primary focus is on water efficiency. Our focus is also in the UK, and we're supported by most, but not quite all, of the water companies, plus some regulators, some of the retail companies that supply businesses, and a number of businesses themselves as well. And this is us at our Christmas ice skating do in London pre-COVID. So our vision is that water is used wisely everywhere, every day. It sounds simple, but it's not quite. So how do we want to achieve this? So one of the main ways that we look to achieve this is through the UK water efficiency strategy. And this is something that Waterwise developed back in 2017, and that's when it was launched. It sets out a bold vision for the UK where all people, homes and businesses are water efficient. And it has a whole host of sort of actions, 65 actions spread across 7 themes, from products to policy, from campaigns to communities. And you can go on our website and you can take a look at that strategy if you want. So it was from 2017. And the strategy's steered by a steering group, and that comprises ourselves and the regulators, government reps, water companies, CC Water, the customer sort of voice, and it's chaired by Daniel Johns from Anglian Water. And to help implement the strategy, we share our knowledge and we share our insights on water efficiency. We also commission research, we agree position papers, and we try and influence others around the water efficiency agenda. What we also do is we facilitate a number of groups. So we chair a really successful Welsh water efficiency group, and thanks to the Welsh CIWEM branch for organising this event today. And we've also involved with the Scottish, similar Scottish group. We chair a retail leadership group, which is the businesses that supply the sort of commercial sector in England and Wales as well. So in addition to the strategy and these groups, we also run training. So we do face-to-face training, but more recently we've developed a lot of bespoke training that we can deliver online to small and large groups of people. We're a campaigning organisation. So we run a water saving week every year, where we try and target water saving behaviours in the public. And we reached about 3.5 million people last year, which was a record for us, which was amazing in the UK. We also run an annual water efficiency conference, which this year was focused on the climate emergency and the role that water efficiency can play in helping adapt and mitigate the climate emergency. And that was great. We did it online in July, and we had over 750 people dialing in to the different sessions, which was fantastic. And then we've just recently started a campaign that we're doing jointly with Water UK, which is called Water's Worth Saving. And you might have seen this on Twitter, Facebook, etc., through social media. So if you use that hashtag Water's Worth Saving, you'll be able to find a lot of the materials and information. And the aim of this campaign is to reach 20 million people in the UK. Finally, we also commission research to try and influence policy and regulation around water efficiency. So we did some work over the last couple of years on water labelling that I'll talk about a bit later. And just prior to this meeting, we were on a steering group discussing a new report on rainwater harvesting and grey water reuse, which will be published at the end of August, early September. So this is really important because we need the evidence base to be able to change policy so that it's more supportive of a water efficient people, businesses and communities. So I'll now pass over to Lydia, and she's going to run through a few of the ways, a few of the reasons why we need to save water in the UK.
Great, thanks Nathan. Okay, so we're all getting used to Zoom and online sort of conference calls, so we want to try and get a bit of engagement going. So the next slide is just for you to put an answer in the chat box. If you go to the next slide, Nathan. So if you just use the chat box, and I want you to answer the question, why should we save water in the UK? It's just 1 or 2 words, so no essays or anything, just 1 or 2 word answers. I'm gonna have a look what people are saying. Yeah, 2 really good ones to start us off with. Chalk streams, climate change is a valuable resource. Okay, they're all coming in now. It's responsible, it's a scarce resource to save money. Yeah, these are all brilliant. It's a precious resource to help the environment. Off what PCC targets, yeah, really good points. These are all great. And there's loads of you writing in, so that's fantastic. Thanks for getting involved. Lots of people are saying around water security and adapting to climate change. Okay, thanks for that. There was a whole whirlwind, a wave of answers then, so that worked really well. There's a few more questions throughout the rest of the talk, so please do try and keep being involved. Fab, okay, so we'll talk through some of those answers in a bit more detail. So if you could flick to the next slide, Nathan. So starting with the really obvious one, if you're on a water meter, you should save water because you're going to save money. So if you've got a meter, it's really simple. And this is one of the, although it's really simple, it's one of the most common drivers of people wanting to save water. So in surveys and things, when people are asked, why would you want to save water? Saving money on your bill is kind of the main, most obvious one. And it still seems to be the best driver in terms of behaviour change. And one that's kind of stood the test of time, even though it's quite an obvious one. So there's also an element of affordability, so looking after vulnerable customers and people that struggle to pay their bills. So some CC Water research said that over 3 million households in England and Wales struggle to afford to pay their utility bills. So we can use water efficiency to really help those people save money. So the second part of this one is around energy bills. So you wouldn't just save money on your water bills, you'd also be saving money on your energy bills through saving hot water. So for those customers who aren't on a meter, they could still save money through their energy bill. For example, showering for 1 minute less a day could save you around. So let me get this stat right. So showering for 1 minute less can save 3,000 litres of water over a year, and that would be £7 in terms of your energy bill and £12 in terms of your water bill. So there's both water and energy savings to be made there. Okay, we'll go straight on to the next one, Nathan. I usually spend about an hour and a half just talking about this why save water topic in our training that we do. So I'm going to try and whiz through it for you today. So the second one is saving water to save carbon. And now when you think of tap water, you don't really think of it as having a carbon footprint, but it definitely does. So there's embedded water in the water that we drink through the tap. So that's because of the treatment process, and obviously that uses chemicals as well, and it uses energy to make it clean enough for us to drink. And then also we use a lot of energy to pump that water around the network to get it to our homes. And once it reaches our homes, we obviously use more energy to heat that water up so that it's hot water. So the water sector contributes around 6% of carbon emissions compared to the total UK carbon emissions. So to explain that again, the whole UK carbon emissions, 6% of that is down to water. And then breaking that down a little bit further, 1% of it is to do with operational carbon emissions, and then 5% of it is to do with heating energy in our homes. So when we think about saving water, saving hot water is kind of even more important than saving cold water. Okay, next one, Nathan. So saving water to save wildlife. So although again it sounds obvious, but people sometimes don't make the connection that the water we drink from our tap in our home comes from our local environment. So it comes from the places that we love to walk in and enjoy. So whether that's rivers, lakes, or underground. And by saving water, we can help keep the water in the environment and try and prevent those river levels from dropping. So wildlife are severely impacted if those river levels do drop, and there's all sorts of different impacts on Fishermen find that there's impacts on where they can fish and when. Birds and insects, there's impacts as well on their habitats. So it really does impact biodiversity. So every litre of water we can save at home is a litre more in the environment that we can leave where it should be for the wildlife. So someone mentioned chalk streams earlier as well, so that's a really important one. So for those of you who don't know, chalk streams are a particularly sort of special type of river. They have particularly alkaline pH, and that means that they can be habitats to a variety of different biodiversity that can't survive in other places. So we have around 95% of the world's chalk streams in England, but they are particularly vulnerable to low river levels. And if any of you follow, some of the conversations around chalk streams on Twitter, they can get particularly passionate. People are very passionate about protecting the kind of special chalk streams that we've got in the UK. So keeping the water in the rivers is really important. And sometimes that connection's lost between our local environment and the water that we use at home. So yeah, keep a lookout. There's lots of strong campaigns on Twitter around protecting chalk streams. Okay, next one, Nathan. Thank you. This is another one that lots of people mentioned in the chat box. So there's kind of two points here about adaptation and about mitigation. So obviously the saving carbon that we talked about earlier, that's around mitigating climate change. And this one's more about adaptation. So the crazy weather we've had just in 2020, we've had more extreme weather patterns. We've had heat waves, we had floods, beginning of last year, beginning of the year before. We've had droughts declared across East Anglia earlier this year and in some of North London and Hertford last year. So we really are experiencing climate change now, and being able to be more efficient with our water use and reduce the amount of water that we use every day will help us to adapt to those future challenges that we'll be facing because of climate change. And we've seen it in other countries, and I think I really feel as if it's starting to happen to us now. The last year we've just experienced, the last 3 years we've experienced such turbulence in our climate. So the less water we can use, the kind of more resilient we'll be to these changes in the future. And there's loads, I could talk about just this topic for ages, but there's loads of information out there. The UN's World Water Day this year, they published an amazing report on climate change and water and the impact to the water cycles globally. So that's a really good report to refer you to if you want more information on this one. Next one, Nathan. So saving water because of population growth. So this especially impacts areas in the southeast, but cities across the UK are experiencing population increases. And obviously this means that water companies are having to find new sources of water to feed that growing population. And a lot of the time, I was talking to somebody from Anglian Water recently, and they said, we're not able to access new water resources in our area anymore. So that increased population, it's going to have to be that all of those people use less so that the kind of water that we do have can go around the people that we have. So the other part of this is around lifestyle changes. So we tend to be using more and more water as kind of generations go on. So people are using 50 litres more now per day than they were 60 years ago. So if you were to speak to, grandparents or people around 60 years ago, they'll remember that, they were just as clean as we are, but somehow they used 50 litres less water a day. And these sort of changes are to do with power showers and jet washers and kind of lifestyle changes. So we're seeing a lot of changes during the hot weather with paddling pools and hot tubs, and you can rent a hot tub for a week now. So I've seen a couple of my friends have done that recently, but it uses 1,000 litres of water to do something like that. So these kind of trends of enjoying the hot weather and staycations in the UK this year have really seen peaks in water demand. So because of these reasons, it's important that those of us here, all on this call, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, we're all environmentalists, but really need to do our bit to sort of spread the message, but also reduce our own personal daily water use. Okay, so that was a whistle stop 5 reasons. As I was saying, usually in the training we have 10 reasons and I take hours to go through that. So that was just a little snapshot there. So the next section is section 3. So how do we use the water that we are supplied? And I'm going to hand back to Nathan.
I think Lydia, I thought you were going to be doing this bit, but that's fine. So yeah, if you want to use the chat box to answer this question, what % of the water that we get supplied goes to businesses? So just put a percentage, what percentage you think of the 100% goes to businesses of the water that's supplied in the UK? So we're getting quite a lot of, quite a loads of answers going through. They're going through both stats. Ranging from 80% is used by business down to 10%. I can see there as well.
There's loads of guesses. No idea.
No idea from Emma. Hi there, Emma.
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay, brilliant. All right. Well, all will be revealed.
Okay, next slide, Nathan. I'll take it back. It was my slide. You're right. So of the overall water supplied by water companies, we can see here that household consumption, so that's domestic supply, makes up 55% of the water that the water companies put into the network. 20% of that is business use, so that's non-household consumption. And obviously this varies depending on water company area, but this is the average for the UK. And the shocking one, really, when the first time I saw this pie chart, is that leakage figure. I mean, everyone knows that leakage is high, but when you see it compared to how much, it's basically the same as what business customers use, it is a really high amount. So yeah, about 22% of water put into the network is lost through leakage, and then just 3% for other usage there.
Great. So yeah, just picking up the baton again. Thanks, Lydia. So how do we use that 55%? So the 55% that goes to household customers, what do we actually use it for? So this is a really interesting table that Artesia have put together in a report they did for Ofwat a couple of years ago. And it sort of shows that some things are sort of fairly flat. So the amount of water, the proportion of water we're using for washing clothes and washing dishes has stayed fairly sort of steady as those devices have become more water efficient. The amount of water used in toilet flushing has sort of gone down, but again, that might be because we've got more efficient toilets and dual flush toilets. But what you can see is the amount of water we're using for personal washing is going through the roof. It's, it's gone up from like 28% in the 70s, way up to over, in the sort of high 30% figures. So what's driving this? What's driving this increase in water use for personal washing? So strangely, one of the reasons for this is showering. So originally when showers came in, it was a water saving thing. Take a shower instead of having a bath, it uses less water. But actually what's happening is people are taking a lot of showers. It's not unusual to have people taking 10 showers a week, whereas they used to take one bath a week. And well, I used to take one bath a week anyway, when I was a kid. So it's quite easy to be using 10 times as much water through your shower than you might have been using in the past through your bath. So something that was brought in as a water saving idea as part of the benefits is actually partly resulting in a lot more personal water use. So that's really, it's really interesting and something that, we need to keep an eye on going into the future as well, because these things are becoming social norms as different generations are coming through. They have these behaviours embedded in how they use water. So I thought you might be quite interested in this sort of magic eye picture of water demand. So I'll talk you through it because it's a little bit hard to get your head around. So basically, you've got a 24-hour day. So on the vertical scale from midnight to midnight, going upwards, you've got a 24-hour scale. And then if you go across on the x-axis, that's elapsed sort of weeks and months through the year. So what these colours show is that the lighter the colour, the bigger the demand, so the more water we're using. So if you start on the left-hand side, you can see at the bottom left-hand corner, it's quite dark. That's because it's at night. And we're not using a huge amount of water at night. And then you get a peak in the morning between about 7 and 8 o'clock. And then it sort of drops off during the working day when people traditionally were out at work using water somewhere else. And then it picks up again in the evening. You get the brighter colours about sort of 3/4 of the way up where there's evening use. And you can even see things like weekends in there, You can also, if you look about halfway along, you can see Christmas last year, about halfway along that graph. Different behaviours, people getting up later in the morning, so you lose the sort of morning peak of water. And if you scroll a bit further across, you start to see the impact of lockdown and COVID on water use and behaviours. This is water use in the home, and you see that as people have been sort of encouraged to stay in their homes and not travel out and go to work, etc., outside of their homes, the whole pattern has shifted. The peak has moved later in the morning. There's some really intense, like high level water use during the day, and the peaks are higher in the evening as well. It's some real bright colours there in the evening. So I thought you might be interested. It's a bit of a sort of magic eye thing, but it shows the sort of pattern of use through the day and also through the weeks, and you can see how COVID has changed water use and behaviours in the house. And I've got another one here, which is like, this is the equivalent picture for business use, for commercial sort of business use outside of the home. So it's almost the reverse of the previous one. You know, you get the peaks during the day, obviously quiet at the weekends, but and you can see the Christmas sort of holiday periods there as well. But if you go over to the right-hand side, there's the lockdown, and that's people not going to work, not using water at work, and that demand for water in work hugely dropping off. Now, there's some really, this isn't just for interest, there's some really interesting questions that this throws up for the water sector and for all of us. If these sort of trends are going to persist in the future, you know, if more people are going to work at home, how is water use, how water using patterns going to change in the future, and how are we going to, how are we going to make sure we've got enough water to meet those changing demand patterns? So before we go on any further, I've got another question for you to make sure everyone's awake. So please, could you use the chat box to answer this question? So thinking of yourself, how many litres of water do you think the average person in the UK uses at home in England and Wales? So we've got plenty of answers going through. 200, I saw 40 litres go past.
40, 50.
Yeah.
160, lots of people around 140, 150 mark.
Yeah, so that's great. Actually, a lot of people seem pretty switched on about this, which is good.
I think we've got some industry people on this call.
So this is like hot off the press. So this is like just recently put on the website Discover Water, and you can find out loads of facts and figures about your water companies and how they're performing, not just on water consumption, but also on pollution and other sort of topics as well. So the average in the UK, in England and Wales, is 142 last year. Big gap between metered and unmetered. So unmetered households, individuals are using about a third more than individuals who've got meters, which is pretty dramatic difference. And then on the map on the right, these are the figures by the different water companies. So the map's a bit small, so you can't get much detail out of it, but you can see it's quite a variable picture. And some of the highest usages are in the southeast, which is also one of the most water stressed areas. So you've got a bit of a double whammy of high use and water stress areas as well. So that's the UK. So how do we compare with Europe? I know we're leaving Europe, but it's interesting to sort of have this comparison. So here we go. We're on about 150 if you take the UK as a whole. We're actually not that good. This is data from the European Commission from about 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. We're at higher levels than most of Northern Europe, and we're only sort of out-competing a couple of countries really in Southern and Eastern Europe. We're one of the highest in terms of Europe. But as Lydia said earlier, it wasn't always like that. This is another graph that Artesia have prepared over the last couple of years, and it basically shows that trend in domestic consumption, individual consumption, going up from us using sort of in the 80s, 85 litres a person, in the 60s, through the 70s, through the 80s. It does start to flatten off a bit in the 2000s, which coincidentally was when Waterwise was set up. So, you know, maybe there's something in that. And it does then starts to drop back down again, which is great, and that's what we want to see. But if you look at the last few years, it's creeping up again. So that trend, that downward trend over the last few water industry investment periods is starting to bump back up. Now that might be because of the weather, but it's whatever it's because of, it's a worrying trend when we need to see water consumption going down, not up. So there's still much to be done, and we can't take our foot off the pedal, basically. So yeah, this is a looking forward now. So those graphs were looking back. This is looking forward, and there's a really interesting piece of work done last year by the Environment Agency, and they're called the National Water Resources Framework, and it was published in March 2020, and it basically looks forward to 2050 and looks at what additional water we might need to maintain our resilience against population growth and climate change and environmental expectations as well. So what they found is that there's a huge deficit basically that is opening up, and we need to find about 3,500 million extra litres of water a day just to pretty much stand still. And that's a shockingly sort of huge number, but that's the scale of the sort of massive challenge that we face. And what you can also see on this graph is that in the multicoloured bars are some of the solutions that were looked at in this National Water Resources Framework. So you see that leakage and water efficiency is earmarked to offset at least sort of half of this additional water demand. So we need, unless we actually get some success and make some progress on both leakage and water efficiency, we're going to struggle to meet these future deficits. There are a range, as well as what we can do individually, there's a range of policies that we can adopt as a country to try and help in reducing consumption. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So there's lots of things we can do individually, but Lydia and I are going to focus on 5 top line policy changes that we think are needed to help meet that future deficit and to turn around the increase in consumption that we're seeing over the recent years. So the first one of these is that we need a mandatory UK water efficiency label on our products and linking it to minimum standards. So basically, this is on the products that we all buy, like taps, showers, washing machines, dishwashers, etc. Having a water efficiency label that tells you whether those products are water efficient or not water efficient. They've already had one of these in place in Australia for the last 15 years, and it's saving a huge amount of water and energy and carbon. And there's some figures there, 300 megalitres a day of water, the Australian water label is saving already. And it saves people money because they've got more efficient devices in their homes as well. So it's a very cost beneficial policy change that could be made. We've already got efficiency labels for products when it comes to energy. We've got them on our products, we've got them on our properties, we've got them on our business properties, but there's nothing for water. There's no mandatory scheme anyway for water. So there's a big gap there we think needs to be addressed. We've done some work with the Energy Savings Trust looking at if we had a label in the UK, what could it achieve? And the figures are quite dramatic. So a mandatory water label in the UK on our products that's linked to minimum standards for buildings could save us over 1,500 megalitres a day within 25 years. So that's about 40% of that deficit that I was talking about a couple of slides ago. So just this single policy can have a massive beneficial impact on meeting those future deficits. It saves people money. It saves householders around £40 a year off their water and energy bills at a cost of 60 pence a year. So it's hugely cost beneficial. And it's equivalent to taking 1 million cars off the road in terms of energy. It's a no-brainer. I've heard people say, this is a no-brainer, why don't we do it? It's the single most impactful policy that the government could introduce in the UK. So over to you, Lydia, for this one.
So out of the 5 reasons, the first one was labelling, second one is metering. This is another one which could, and already does to some degree, implement huge change in terms of reducing PCC. So metering is a really effective way of bringing down demand. When people are on a meter, they know that they're being charged for what they use less. So research shows it's about 12% less if you're on a meter, and it can be up to 17% less if you're on a smart meter. And that's if people have access to their kind of real-time data. So if they can look on an app or on a monitor and see how much water they're using and how much that's costing them. So 17% reduction potentially could be a huge help to all of those demand challenges that we outlined earlier. So again, these are the Discover Water figures here, which are kind of hot off the press. They're 2019 to 2020 data, and it shows that metered customers use around 129 litres of water a day, whereas unmetered can be up to 171. So when we're talking about that PCC figure that we showed you those pictures and those maps of, that's an average figure of these two amounts. So there really is quite a stark contrast there. And there's lots of reasons for that. Obviously, people that are probably more water efficient are more likely to be on a meter as well. But generally, they are accepted to be a really good kind of water efficiency device. And there's other benefits to metering as well. So obviously, water companies can pick up leakage much quicker, and they can manage the networks better. And it's a kind of way to engage with customers. I heard once that customer contact with water companies is 90% negative. So anything we can do to contact their customers that can be something, a positive connection, to give them more information or to give them more control over their water usage is a really positive thing, and can start that engagement with a customer to then have those conversations about water efficiency. And metering, it's not a new thing. There's been decades of people supporting metering and trying to get faster metering rollout. And the National Infrastructure Commission has been advising for this faster meter rollout and also now smart meter rollout. And many water companies have put in metering as kind of a big project as part of their AMP7 business plan. So hopefully we'll see the kind of this area really increase, as well as the data that we're getting back from smart meters, which has proven so kind of essential to understanding the water change and the usage change patterns because of lockdown as well. So yeah, metering is number 2. Okay,
number 3, we talked earlier about the 20% of water that goes to businesses. So a lot of the spotlight is on water consumption in the home. There's targets, there's the Ofwat sort of targets for businesses, and there's a lot of transparency about how much water is being used in the home and where we might want to get to, and there's a lot of policy attention on it as well. But it's not the same when it comes to business water use. It's been a bit of a hidden area, despite the fact that 20% of supplied water goes to businesses. And also despite the fact that water efficiency, or greater water efficiency, was one of the big benefits that was touted when the water retail market was set up a few years ago to provide water through a new competitive route to businesses. So despite those ambitions, it's an area that still needs a lot of attention. And it's an area that Waterwise are very active in. So we're working at the moment with a group called the Retail Wholesaler Group to come up with an action plan to try and sort this out and to try and address this, this sort of disparity, really, both at a policy level and an operational level, so that we don't just focus all our attention and efforts on reducing domestic water use, that we've got an equivalent programme of policies and activities that are supporting businesses to reduce water use. And we're dealing with that 20% as well. And yeah, so policy number 4, so just 2 to go now. So policy number 4 is one that you might have guessed, really, hearing some of Lydia's comments earlier on, is about better joining up of water and energy efficiency policy. As sort of Lydia was highlighting, a typical UK household, around 20% of their gas bill can be from heating water. So there's a connection, there's a sort of connection between water efficiency and energy efficiency. If we're more water efficient, we can be more energy efficient. However, water and energy policy feels like to me anyway, often sits in two completely different silos, which is a nonsense. There's a huge opportunity to get better join up between energy and water efficiency policy. And just an example, the Green Homes grant that the government in the UK is implementing to give householders subsidies for putting in energy efficiency devices and equipment into their homes. It doesn't include anything to do with water efficiency at the moment. And we've been jumping up and down about this with others, trying to get that changed. It's a big opportunity that's going to be lost. We need to be thinking about resource efficiency, not just energy efficiency.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, it's the classic issue, isn't it? Okay, number 5. So this one I kind of think is like the silent issue, that if you just don't know about it, then you'd have no idea that this was happening. So around 5 to 8% of toilets in the UK are leaking at any one time. And when I say leaking, I don't mean sewage, I don't mean leaking onto the floor in the bathroom. I mean slowly, quietly, silently running down the back of the bowl, so from the cistern into the bowl. So if you were to look in the toilet and you could see a little trickle on the water, that means that your toilet's leaking. But sometimes they're really hard to see. You can't hear them, and sometimes you can't even see them. So 5 to 8% of toilets are leaking, and that was from Thames Water has been to thousands of business and home audits and recorded that. And then every toilet that they have found is between 200 and 400 litres of water. If it is leaking, it's leaking around 200 to 400 litres of water a day. So that's like having, if you've got a leaking toilet in your house, it's like having an extra 1 or 2 or nearly 3 people living in your house. So this one kind of really puts into perspective those small actions that we're probably all doing, like turning the tap off when you brush your teeth, and reusing your washing up water to water your plants, and all those things are great. But if you've got a leaking toilet in your house, it almost pales into insignificance, that those small actions that we can do. So there are around 400 megalitres is estimated to leak from UK toilets every day, which is enough to supply 2.8 million people. So this is the population of Edinburgh, Cardiff, Belfast, Manchester, Sheffield, Liverpool and Bristol combined. They could be provided with water if we were able to stop this problem of leaking toilets. So along with kind of those big things that we've talked about in our sort of top 5 policy issues, this one really comes down to design and working with manufacturers, but also, government leadership and water companies getting behind this problem and really sharing the problem. It could be that there needs to be a campaign to tell people that all of their toilets are leaking, and it's as if people just have taps running on in their bathrooms all the time. And, there could be the need here for a communication campaign to tell people how to find out if they've got a leak, and then if they do find one, how do they fix it? And how can they install better toilets in the future in new homes and things that don't leak with better designs. So fixing leaky loos could contribute 10% of the additional water capacity that's needed to cope with extreme drought in England and Wales by 2050. So as sort of unglamorous as talking about toilets is, and leaky loos sounds like an awful name for a campaign or a kind of policy change, but this is something which we need to make it glamorous somehow. We need to get people talking about the fact that you could supply 2.8 million people with the water that's simply running out of our toilets. So yeah, I talk about this one a lot, and I'm quite passionate about it because I feel like if people knew this was happening, they'd want to change their actions, just like they do with turning the tap off when they brush their teeth and having shorter showers. Oh, next one. Okay, so number 6. So this one is less of kind of something that's happening now, but we're just waiting on the results of this. So some of you might be aware that the DEFRA consultation, DEFRA went out and asked sort of opinions on personal water use and ways to reduce personal water use. So we were really pleased that this, this opportunity came around, that we were able to comment on and help others comment on this consultation. So there was a great opportunity for lots of different organisations to attend workshops and as well as the written kind of consultation piece. So we could have these discussions with DEFRA and bring up some really big issues like the metering and the labelling, and we also talked around rainwater harvesting and how we can change people's behaviours and how government can support that. So at the moment we're waiting on a formal policy response from DEFRA to see what the next steps will be with this consultation and taking it forward. But hopefully it's a big opportunity for DEFRA to pick up on some of those kind of 5 points we talked about before, and to get their support moving forward.
Thanks,
Okay.
Lydia.
Yeah.
So into the last section now. Just before we go into the Q&A, just wanted to sort of summarise some of the key points that we've raised. Hopefully, you found it a really interesting session. So yeah, I suppose the sort of top line thing really is, are we water wise? Are we there yet? That question that we posed right at the beginning. It's pretty obvious we're not. We're on the way there, but there's a lot more needs to be done, and we can do it. It's in our gift, all of us, as individuals, but also in the roles that we have with designers, house builders, consultancies, businesses, regulators, government, etc. It's a shared responsibility to achieve these benefits of being waterwise. So securing the water supplies, reducing our footprint, our environmental footprint, protecting those chalk streams, reducing our carbon emissions, and saving money, saving people money as well. We talked about the key policy interventions, particularly the mandatory like product water labelling, which is like hugely cost beneficial, and also the difference that metering can make to consumption, particularly when it's linked to behaviour change. People actually know how much water they're using, and they know the impact of their behaviours. Then you've got a much better chance of influencing what they're doing and how they're using water. But as we've also highlighted, there's some other issues, some other policy issues about getting to grips with business water use, sorting out the leaky loo, the pervasive leaky loo issue. And I've got a leaky loo that I need to get sorted out that I found last week. And all this improvement about join up between water and energy policy as well. So in terms of like what can you do? So a lot of this has been sort of fairly sort of high level, particularly in terms of some of the policy stuff. But what can you do like practically after this webinar? Just a few sort of tips really. There's loads more on the Waterwise website, or on the if you Google "Water's Worth Saving," you'll sort of find your way to loads more tips. But some of the simpler things are just taking a shorter shower. Have a shower, but just make it a minute shorter. Looking out for that leaky loo when you're at home, but also at work as well. If you see that at work, go and report it to your sort of office or facilities manager. And no ifs, no buts. Fit a water butt so that we can deal with some of those extremes. We can capture the water when it's available and then reuse it in our gardens. If you want to find out more after this webinar about water efficiency and what's going on, particularly in the UK, but also internationally, you can sign up to our newsletter. It's free and it comes out once a month, and it's full of little snippets and tidbits about water efficiency and things that are going on that you might be interested in. And then lastly, if you want to find out more and do more of a sort of deep dive into the wonderful world of water efficiency, then you can register or get in touch with me or Lydia about one of the training sessions, or we could organise a bespoke one for your business as well as a possible thing.
Just to say, Nathan, on the website now you can book on the training on our website. We've set up the new system so you can do it on there now. Brilliant.
So thanks for all for listening. I think this has been recorded, so I think the recording will probably be shared as well afterwards. But moving now into the sort of questions, and I think Tracy's going to act as the sort of compare and chair the Q&A session.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Nathan and Lydia, for your talk. Before we go into questions, I just wanted to plug the fact that in Wales, Welsh Government are obviously very supportive of water efficiency, as outlined in their water strategy for Wales. and with the formation of the Wales Water Efficiency Group, which includes yourselves in Waterwise, NRW, and the water companies and Consumer Council for Water, that hopefully some policies and work will be going ahead to address some of the things that DEFRA have already been doing. And I put a link into a recent report that came out literally last week from Welsh Government, where they did a survey about people's attitudes to water efficiency in Wales that people might be interested in reading to see what that said. So thank you. I shall go to the questions. I want to go to the very beginning, and apologies if I mispronounce your name, but Yola McCoy says that they're interested in the water saving initiatives in industrial applications, particularly in the past, that were driven by the Federation House Commitment. So I'd like to know what is the future strategies to encourage water saving or recycling or reuse in terms of industry, such as the food and beverage sector. So if either of you would like to take on that one and answer that one, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I'll kick off. So that's a great question. As I said earlier, the business use of water has been slightly sort of hidden, been a slightly hidden area over the last few years, but it's getting a lot of attention now, a lot more attention. We're producing an action plan with the retailer wholesaler group. So it's with a lot of these businesses, their water supply will be via a water retailer, although ultimately the water would have come from a water wholesaler. So we need to engage the wholesalers and the retailers in acting on water efficiency in businesses and industry. So we're developing an action plan at the moment. It's due to be published in the late autumn, probably about November or early December time. And that will set out not just some like some policy things, but it will also set out some practical ways, including campaigns and awareness raising that can be done in a collaborative way to target different water using sectors, including the food and drink. We had the Food and Drink Federation come to one of our recent events, and they told us about some of their initiatives, their water efficiency initiatives. So we're looking to join up with organisations like that and trade bodies to make sure that the message is sort of tailored to suit the different business types.
And I suppose, Nathan, is it worth pointing out that in Wales, the retail market is slightly different in that there's a threshold of 50 megalitres per annum, which means only large non-householders can be in the retail market. Otherwise, they're still with the water company, the incumbent.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so there is that subtle difference between England and Wales. So it's just the bigger companies or bigger water users in Wales, whereas in England it's a lot broader. And I think what they found is that actually it's relatively few of the businesses use the vast majority of the water. It's something like 2 or 3% of the businesses are using about 70 or 80% of the water that goes to businesses. So it should be fairly easy to target awareness raising and support campaigns, etc., particularly on those 2 or 3% that are using the huge sort of vast bulk of business water. But we don't want to forget the others, because there are things that they can be doing to help as well.
And I think while we're on the topic of the non-householders and the retailers, I'll go to a question that Mikhail Wilmot asked, which is obviously what incentive is there for retailers to promote water efficiency if they'll make more water from selling more water?
Do you want to answer that, Nathan?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we work with the water retail companies, and we've got a group called the Retail Leadership Group on Water Efficiency, and we have about 7 or 8 of the retail companies that come along, and they're definitely sort of committed to furthering this agenda. What they need is a more supportive policy environment to help them do it, and the right sort of incentives and tariffs and things that enable them to do it. Their margins are fairly tight in that market,
I was going to add to that, Nathan, that we've got 3 retail companies who are Waterwise supporters, which means they pay to fund the work that we do in this sector. So that there are retailers who want to go the extra mile to talk about and to support water efficiency, and a lot of retailers are using water efficiency as a kind of competitive advantage to get people to change to their company. But obviously that's potentially not as much as we thought we would see in the retail market, but it is there, and there are some retailers who really are pushing to be kind of ambitious in water efficiency.
Well, thank you. We're going to move to leakage briefly. Philip Morgan's asked the question, has there been any work in understanding where the majority of leakage is occurring, for example, when transporting from the reservoirs to areas that need it in the network for other users?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, leakage isn't an area we sort of do.
I'm quite happy to answer if you'd like me to.
Yeah.
being
I've got a
family.
partial answer, which is just that that understanding of leakage is being informed by metering. So as more meters are going in, there's a far greater understanding of where the water's being leaked. And I think they're finding it's a surprising amount is actually in people's homes and in people's supply pipes, a lot more than was envisaged. But yeah, that's a partial answer. If you've got anything more, Tracy, then.
Yeah, so background, I'm in water resources planning, so I deal with water company plans, and leakage, ultimately water companies will have to monitor the leakage and come up with forecasts to 25 years in the future for what they think their leakage totals will be. So therefore they need to gather data, which is usually district meter areas in resource zones, to monitor leakage. And the parts of the network, so directly from the reservoir, may not be leakage. It may be distribution losses, treatment work losses. So it only becomes leakage when it gets to the supply side, customer side of the system, and then it becomes leakage, and then they try to do monitoring to understand leakage. And as Nathan alluded to, as become more smart metering, some water companies are now discovering what they thought may be leakage, such as nighttime uses they thought were predominantly night leakage, it turned out to be actual use. For example, people stay up in the night now. People don't always use water in the day. So the water companies are becoming more and more sophisticated in understanding leakage as they go on. So hopefully that answers your question, Philip.
They've got all sorts of techniques as well to detect leaks, and they list with sound,
yes,
with satellites, with sniffer dogs.
They do use dogs. Yes, Severn Trent Water use dogs. Yeah. Sorry. Ryan Carroll's asking, now I think this is in relation to a graph. You had a graph up that was looking at comparing water from the tap across Europe. So he's asking, are the consumption rates labelled, including bottled water? What are the main reasons behind these figures, basically?
Yeah, I think it's probably that, well, there were two. There was a UK one, which is, and there was a European one, and they're both showing the same thing. They're showing the litres per person per head that is supplied to each individual in those parts of the country or in those countries. So they don't include people going out and buying bottled water, and they don't include people going to the gym and having showers there instead of having them at home, or any of that sort of thing. So that's really just, both those graphs or those tables were just looking at the water that's used from supply in the household. There's a big water footprint that is outside of the home in our businesses and in our recreational activities as well.
And I think there's another question from someone who's asking about, again, the regional water efficiency graph. North has been shown as negative water need. Does that mean that they predict the North will need less than what they have to supply? So could you explain why the north graph was negative?
Yeah, it's because they've actually got a potential surplus of water in the north. So whereas in all the other regions, there's a deficit into the future because of climate change and growth, etc. In the north, there's predicted to be a surplus. So that's great, so they maybe don't have the same challenges in the same way as some of the other regions. And you could say, well, could we just get that? Could we move that surplus to other regions? And that's something that's been actively looked at, so can you join water companies together or areas within water companies to move water where it's in surplus to areas where it isn't in surplus. So yeah, that's what that is. The fact the north is in surplus though doesn't take away from the need for water efficiency in those areas. So if the north is more water efficient, it frees up more water to potentially be used in other regions, and it brings all those other benefits as well in terms of energy and environmental benefits and carbon benefits, etc. And it saves people money. So there are still other reasons to be water efficient, even if the prediction is that the north is going to be in surplus.
I think there's two questions that follow on quite nicely from this. Is do you think we're doing enough to reduce PCC, and also is there data available to understand more about hot tub usage?
Shall I kick off, Lydia, and then you can perhaps chip in? But we're not doing enough collectively, no. And that means as individuals, that means as government, as water companies, the whole sort of, in the round, we're not doing enough because water consumption is going up. When to meet these future challenges, we need it to be going down. So there are things we can all do to sort of to address that. So we hopefully highlighted some of the sort of policy, the policy steps, and some of the individual things that can be done as well.
I mean, you'd be able to know if they had a meter.
I think Lydia,
I think your sound's leaving us.
Oh, is it?
It's coming in and out.
Okay, I'll try one more time, and if it's still bad, I'll hand it back to Nathan.
Can hear you now.
Oh, okay. I was going to say.
We lost you again.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll give up.
On the hot tub issue, this is a hot issue, the hot issue, because more and more people are getting hot tubs. And same with paddling pools and garden sort of recreational use of water is changing. We're starting to see some new sort of norms appearing in society, but there's been very little work done so far as to what the implications of that might be. It's definitely something that we need to be looking at, I think, over the next year or so, as to what those scenarios, how they might play out. It's quite difficult to have a water efficient hot tub as such, because you just fill it up. But it comes down to more around things like, how often you empty it. Are you using the right chemicals so that the water can be kept in the hot tub for a long time? Same thing with paddling pools. It's sort of, not replacing the water every week or every day, keeping it in for a long time, minimising the amount of topping up that might need to happen. And when you do need to top it up, particularly with paddling pools, trying to find other ways to use the water that you're draining out on the garden, for example. But it's a really good question, and it's an area, we looked at Google searches during the lockdown for hot tubs, and they've gone through the roof. There've been so many more people searching on Google for places where they can buy a hot tub and a paddling pool. So it's going to become a big issue. It's going to become a big issue, and it warrants a bit more attention, I think, in the future.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, just about. You're cutting out.
Okay, I was just going to say that it highlights the importance of smart meters. If people could see how much water and money they had used filling up their hot tub, they might be surprised.
Yes, and And Nathan, am I right in believing that some governments have already, when they've got times of stress such as dry weather, tried to speak to supermarkets about not selling paddling pools at those times of the year?
But it's a really difficult discussion.
Yeah.
I think because when it's roasting hot, people want to have fun, and you don't want to be like the fun police and sort of, you can't have a paddling pool for your kids during the sort of roasting weather, that sort of thing. So I think probably from Waterwise's perspective, it's more, we've been more focusing on using the water as efficiently as possible if you're going to have a paddling pool, not filling it and filling it and filling it every day, and reusing the water that you might have filled it up with on the garden, that sort of thing.
A final point on that. If there's another question which kind of links into that, which maybe we could end on. Is he staying steady, or is it going down, and what's happening in the future? And we were talking to Thames today about the new normal and the potential for PCC never to go back to the patterns that we saw pre-lockdown, because people won't go back to work in the same way as they did before. Potentially we're going to see a sort of step change in PCC going forward. So it'll be interesting to watch this space really.
Someone on the chat, Emma, has suggested smart meters should be mandatory if you buy a hot tub. What a great idea! What a great idea! Yeah, that would be brilliant if we can persuade the government on that. That'd be a big one.
I just want to gauge your time. Are you okay to answer one or two questions, or do you want to?
Yeah, fine. I'm fine.
Yeah. Okay, great. Because there's a couple more here. Mikhail Wilmot's asked, should we adopt a block tariff approach? For example, where there's more water you use, the higher the unit cost.
This was something that came up in yesterday on the value of water. It's not something that we've really talked that much about at Waterwise, but the discussions yesterday on that call, on that webinar around how we can instill the value of water in people, and block tariffs was suggested as an idea there. Just my personal opinion is that we should be thinking, maybe as Waterwise we need to be having those conversations again, or another, in light of all the climate change and in light of lockdown and all of these new changes, could we restart those conversations? Yeah,
it's been a bit of a political hot potato, block tariffs in the past, a bit like meters, 10 years ago, meters, like metering, and now that's becoming more norm, more accepted, and the benefits are a bit more obvious. I think block tariffs is a similar sort of thing. It's still a politically sensitive issue, but I think it will probably be where we end up. And yeah, so it is. I think it is going to move up the agenda as an idea. It does make sense, when water's scarce, should the price go up, or when you're using, there are a sort of tail of like users that use literally like thousands of litres a day. Should they be paying at a higher rate for those really high levels of use?
Thank you. And talking about climate change, Dan Evans has asked, with climate change causing more frequent periods of heavy rain, how effective could rainfall harvesting be if implemented at a national scale? And by that, I think it's also incorporating rainwater harvesting, and I assume storage as well. And there's plenty of advantages, but what also are the limitations of that?
Yeah. So this is something we've been up to our eyeballs in the data looking at rainwater harvesting today. As we mentioned earlier, we've commissioned and we've helped project manage a piece of work over the last year for the Environment Agency, looking at rainwater harvesting, trying to update some of the data and the cost benefit analysis that happened that the EA did 10 years ago. So it's not released yet, but I think that obviously there's lots of caveats and barriers to it working, but generally the outlook is more positive than 10 years. The 10 years come on a lot. Pumps use less energy. There's ways of doing gravity-fed systems that and therefore have a lower carbon footprint than they did 10 years ago. So I think the outlook for this, I will sort of caveat that by saying that it's not perfect solution, in that Thames Water, for example, have taken rainwater harvesting out of their business plan for the next 5 years. And that's it, because it wouldn't have helped them in their worst drought situation that they experienced last year, because there just wasn't enough rain in the southeast for it to be particularly effective. So obviously there's lots of barriers in terms of location, rainfall, for lots of the inner tower blocks where the surface area of the roof is small and the demand of the tower block is really high. So there's those kind of physical barriers, as well as the public perception. We've got a bit of research on our website if anyone wants to have a look at it, around the public perceptions of rainwater harvesting and greywater recycling. So there's this sort of yuck.
I think you've cut out, Lydia.
I think she was going to say yuck factor, but yeah, I think probably if you sign up for the newsletter, you'll find out about when this report is coming out. It's going to be sort of early September probably, but there's loads of interesting stuff in there, case studies, a look at like, sort of costs and benefits, and we're now starting to look at policies as well. So what sort of policies could make a difference, and what would they cost, and what would the benefits be in terms of water and financial sort of benefits. So it's getting a lot more sort of renewed interest. The link with the SUDS is really interesting, because the market has definitely gone in that direction. So a lot of the rainwater harvesting providers are also providers of SUDS systems, and they're linking the two things together. So not only can you get the benefits in terms of rainwater harvesting when you need the demand, but you can also use the same systems for capturing the flood water and slowing the flow, basically. So there's a double benefit. So I think we're going to see a bit of a renaissance. I hope we're going to see a bit of a renaissance around rainwater harvesting, in particular in greywater reuse, over the next few years, following this piece of research that we've nearly finished.
Thank you, Nathan. We've got two more questions that I think are covered, and then we'll do closing remarks, if that's okay. Somebody is kindly asked, which is a quite a difficult question to answer, very challenging, interesting question, is what do you think can be done to better make the link between our individual consumption and then our direct impact to the environment? So by that, if we're using a shower or losing a large paddling pool, how reducing that supports our local rivers?
Yeah,
so that connection.
Yeah, this is a great question. It's something I'm really keen to see a lot more of, because there's loads of like water resources models that are used for looking at how much water can get taken out of the environment. So surely we can like run them in reverse and look at how much additional water would be left in the environment if we change our consumption levels. So it should, for me, the models exist to do it. It's just it hasn't really being looked at in that direction, particularly. I think we've talked to the EA about this, Environment Agency and others, about whether we could get something off the ground to look perhaps with a few local case studies and just look at modelling in reverse that connection between reducing consumption and how much extra water do you end up in the chalk stream or the river or the groundwater wetland. So it's a really good question. I've done some really crude calculations, and just trying to remember. I can't remember the exact figures, but I basically looked at if we could reduce our consumption down to about 100 litres a day, then we can. It's equivalent to the low flow in a third of the rivers in the UK. That's the quantum of water that we're talking about. So that saving is equivalent to what we see in a third of our UK rivers during low flow periods in terms of so just get a feel for the scale. But I think there's a great opportunity to make a lot more on that agenda, a lot more around that sort of connection between people's personal behaviours and water use and their local environment and the impacts of water use on it.
Thank you. And we'll just finally end up with this last question, and I apologise if I've missed anybody's questions. So hopefully I've covered them all. But do you think the optional 110 litres per person per day listed in the building regulations. I think in this case, it's possibly the English building regulations, is sufficient for new build properties looking forward towards climate resilience. So is 110 enough for new builds?
No, it's not. And even in England, it's 125 with an option of 110 as well. So a lot of buildings are still being built at 125, which is higher than the water company's ambitions for consumption. So it's ludicrous that we're building houses that are so water inefficient that are going to be around for 50, 100 years. We need those levels to be far lower, with maybe an initial step down to 100, and then over time sort of aiming to go lower than that, and using things like rainwater harvesting in new developments to hit some of those lower levels. So it's not low enough. We've got a discussion. I'm involved in a discussion with government on Monday about this exact topic. So the DEFRA and MHCLG, the Housing Ministry, are going to be on that call. So I'll be making that point to them that we don't 110 would be quite a weak ambition, to be honest. We should be looking at 100 and also what we can do over time beyond that.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for everybody attending today. I just would like to thank the speakers and for everybody for attending today. So thank you, Nathan and Lydia. I've noticed you've put up your emails, so if anybody has any burning questions you want to ask specifically of Waterwise, then please feel free to email. We have recorded the session, so I'm assuming CIWEM will make them available on the website so that everybody can listen back or other new people can have a look. Just a reminder that if you're interested in other CIWEM events, then you can go on the website and look under events, where all the branch events and all the main events are now predominantly online at the moment for obvious reasons. And hopefully the Welsh branch will be looking at their programme going forward, and we'll be advertising those shortly, and they're advertised on the Welsh branch Facebook page as well as on the CIWEM webpage. And please sign up to the Waterwise newsletter, and I think Lydia, you put the contact details in the chat. If not, if in doubt, then email Nathan and Lydia. So thank you very much all for today. And many thanks for everybody who's attended today.